All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Jones, and I work for ecosystem planning and restoration. We're going to talk, as Will alluded to, I'm going to give a good chunk of time to the idea or how we do reach breaks within the SQT. Uh, my laser pointer set up. So there is a SQT process flow chart that steps through, it starts with site selection, identify your project areas, and delineate project reaches. So that's where we are in our day to day. We're still up at the beginning here at step one. In the middle of the flow chart is where you get to collect data and calculate the existing condition values. And then that process ends as Will just, finished his presentation with monitoring and confirming the proposed condition values for the SQT. So here we are up at step one, and this starts in the SQT on the project summary worksheet. So there are 5 worksheets within the SQT workbook or in the Wyoming SQT workbook. My presentations, I will exclusively be talking about the Wyoming SQT, and I'll make a distinction between version 1, version 2. But starting on the project summary worksheet, we ask you to enter data. Actually, I should start with, I don't think we're going to do justice today to the topic of site selection because that is a huge topic, and it can be wide ranging. Maybe you own the property and enjoy fishing on your property. Maybe you're stabilizing a bank to protect some infrastructure, a road or a sanitary sewer line. Maybe you're Wyoming Game and Fish, and your purpose is to conserve wildlife and serve people. In the new Wyoming SQT manual, we do include an example, and that is Savory Creek. And that is one of the Wyoming Game and Fish projects that is downstream of the High Savory Dam. So you can see on the project summary worksheet that they have programmatic goals that are not to generate debits, but are to improve stream function, aquatic habitat, and maintain the facilities on site, among others. So also on that worksheet, we ask for some project description information, and this is kind of setting the scene of where your project takes place. So the ecoregion, bioregion, what river basin you're in, that tells us a lot about the fish assemblage that should be there, and also the huck. This, hmm, hang on, here we go. I'll figure it out. We'll be running smooth by the end of the day. um, Also on that worksheet are summary from the flow alteration module, and then where you can enter your reach specific goals and objectives. And I don't want you to walk away from today being like, gosh, they didn't do a presentation on goals and objectives. And if this is the only chance I get to tell you goals and objectives of a project are important, then leave today knowing goals and objectives are critically important. But today, this presentation is about reach breaks. So also on that project summary worksheet is a reach summary table. Um, in the Wyoming SQT version 2, you can have multiple reaches within the same workbook, and you get to name each of them. So this is really good for when you're talking to your friends or talking to your kids, or when you want to label photos and put them in your wallet or maybe on your website, you name the reaches and describe your reach break criteria. And this is where, for the Savory Creek example, they had sheet piles that were in the stream, and the conditions created between the sheet piles were distinct. And so they broke it into many more reaches than this, but we have an example that contains 4 reaches in the workbook that is provided with the version 2 materials. So you can see that their reach IDs are identified by the sheet pile numbers and that their reach break criteria aligns with those sheet piles. Hang on, it's gonna go. And I know if my lag gets too long, I'll try to switch a slide and remember to take a pause. That's you. Actually, it's a good time to drink water. So I mentioned that the sheet piles are how they did the reach breaks on Savory Creek for that project. But how do you do your reach break assessment? First, you need to know what you are assessing in the SQT. So we'll show the stream function pyramid as 5 functional categories. So while most of the SQT is going to focus on conditions that you find in the channel, Um, there's also assessment of the floodplain conditions and also what comes in laterally from the surrounding watershed. So also your watershed, your riparian vegetation, your floodplain width and condition. So in this photo, the reach extends from upstream end at the bridge to the downstream end, kind of at that forest edge. But this reach also extends laterally to include the floodplain and riparian corridor. So even though the SQT outputs a condition score that is going to be scaled by the length of your channel, just keep in mind when we're talking about reach breaks, not to only focus on what's going on in the channel, but look at what's coming in as well. Whew, all right, a lot of words on this slide. I try to avoid them, but sometimes they're just good for reference, especially since you'll get the PDF slides at the end. My hope is you'll use these for reference if you're not going to crack open the user manual. So where do you break a reach? You're going to break it where there are changes in processes. So the easiest one is when you have separate streams on your project. Like a separate stream is a separate reach. It is a separate entity. It is its own stream. So it gets to be its own reach. Um, Within the same stream, if you have significant changes in the drainage area, so DA here is drainage area, if a tributary comes in that changes the flow and size of your channel, then you're going to have a reach break where that tributary confluence is. If you have a small tributary coming into a very large stream and it is pretty much negligible flow in the grand scheme of how large your receiving water is, that does not require a reach break. In terms of processes, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide too, but where you have structures, particularly diversions, or where you're modifying the flow, you're going to have distinct flow conditions upstream and downstream of structures that modify your flow. You want to keep an eye on the geologic, hydrologic, biological process drivers, and that's a concept on the next slide. I'll go into more detail. And then this is probably more what you were expecting me to say, like, where do you break a reach? You're going to break it where the condition changes. So where the valley or stream condition type or valley condition or valley type changes, or the stream condition and stream type changes. Also where there's a change in stability conditions. So if I go from, a stream reach that is connected to its floodplain, but then I step downstream of head cut, nick point, then you have something that is really incised. Those would be separate reaches. Including in physical conditions would be bed material composition. And you also want to check out riparian community and condition. So sometimes property lines provide like a pretty good reach break estimate, especially if there's different like land management practices going on different sides of the property lines. And also keeping in mind your proposed activity. So if you're impacting a stream and your impacts, upstream are going to be, your impacts in one section are going to be different than your impacts in a downstream section. Just remember to keep that in mind. And in terms of accounting for functional change, you're going to have those as separate reaches. Ooh, all right, process drivers. If you guys have not read the Clur and Thorne 2013 stream evolution model paper, it is open source, publicly available, and I do have a link on this slide, and hopefully that comes through in the PDFs that you can click. But it's a good read, and it goes into the stream function, the stream evolution model that has a pyramid or triangle that has hydrology in the lower left, biology up at the top, and then geology on the right-hand side, or sorry, in the lower right corner. And it asks you guys to ask the questions of what is driving the processes of your stream. So what is governing erosion resistance, stream power, and biotic interaction, and each of these being an axis along the pyramid, the triangle. The examples I have shown here are taken from that paper, but they look at stream power. So particularly in Wyoming, like, is your channel free flowing or is it regulated? And the one on the right shown here looks at the permeability of your underlying soils. So no matter where you are in the country, like if you have a change in geology, like if you have a karst system that suddenly, an impermeable underlying geology switches to a permeable underlying geology, like you have a different process that is going on. And whenever you see those changes in process drivers is where you should think about a reach break. And I included stream power as an example. They have similar um, examples for erosion resistance and biotic interaction as well. All right, and I am also, wait, I'll wait for the slides to catch up. I don't know that I'm ending with an example, but I do have an example to share with you guys. So for this particular site, we were looking to generate credits in the 404 program, and we found a property where cattle were kept on this agricultural field. And as you can hopefully see, there's expansive wetlands in this valley bottom, and attempts to drain these wetlands have not been successful. So we assess the site for potential of meeting our programmatic goals, which is generating credits. We worked with the landowner to come up with the property area that we can buy. And so the red outline is the conservation easement. It looks a little funny. Um, that's what we purchased from the landowner. And our goal was to maximize the amount of wetlands we got into the conservation easement. And then once we've gone through that process of site selection and defining what is the project area, then is the next step is reach breaks. So delineating the drainage areas. Up here there's a culvert under the road. The drainage area to the stream there is 0.9 square miles. This tributary is a full 0.6 square miles, so it does significantly change the drainage area where it enters. So you see the blue line is 1.5 square miles. There's another small tributary that comes out of this forest that increases the drainage area a little bit more. And by the end of the reach, the drainage area is 1.7 square miles. So the reach breaks. We have one stretch. This is the desktop cut of it. So there are two steps to this process where you're first going to look at the desktop and do drainage area delineations and see what you can see from aerial imagery. And then you're going to go out in the field and verify it. So we've got one break down to the confluence. We've got the trib coming in as a separate reach. And then the rest of this at the desktop cut is kind of all lumped into one. The drainage area doesn't change significantly. That is until you notice we have a lot of wetlands up here. And then the valley, actually looking at topography data, the valley narrows starting right at this kind of property corner there. So that then gives us 4 reaches. We've got 1, 2 for the trib, 3 down to where the valley narrows, and then 4 the 4th reach being in that narrower valley without the expansive wetlands on either side. And then we go out in the field and we get to take a look at the reach conditions and see where we want to make or confirm the desktop reach breaks, and also observe things we couldn't see from the desktop. So there's actually bedrock control hanging out down at the downstream end. And upon assessing the conditions, there's a lot more bedrock and a better condition for what is reach 4. So reach 3 and 4, that downstream end in the confined valley, was split between condition, like how much work they needed for restoration. So this is showing a picture of what we found in the field for reach 1. And also while we were in the field, we were trying to determine if we needed any additional reach breaks in reach 1 or if it was kind of a single homogeneous condition. All right, high five. Yes, we did reach breaks for our example site. But wait, we're not done. There is a second component or part to delineating reach breaks, and that's identifying representative subreaches. So once you've, gone into the field, verified your reach breaks, you might be like, gosh, reach 1 is really long. Do I have to collect quantitative data on the entirety of reach 1? And the answer is no. If you've done your reach breaks correctly and you've, established it's all a similar enough condition, then you can assess what is called a representative subreach within that reach. Within the larger reach, you can identify a representative subreach to collect survey data, particularly, and also vegetation data. This is a figure in your user manual that tells you what parts of the assessment you're going to look at the entire reach and what parts of the assessment you can look at a smaller part of the reach. So for I'm going to use parameter terms. Just know that later in the day, and it might be the next no couple presentations from now, we're going to like tell you more about the basic parameters, like the reach hydrology, hydraulic, and geomorphology parameters. I apologize for using terms we haven't introduced yet. Bear with me. But for the reach scale, so looking at the entire project reach, we're going to look at reach runoff. Um, we're also going to look at base flow dynamics throughout the entire reach. And if there are side channels or armoring, so those aren't parameters, those are specific metrics that look at aspects of floodplain connectivity and lateral migration. So throughout the entire reach, you want to note if those two things are present. Within the representative subreach, you're going to look or you're going to collect your survey data, and your survey data gives you floodplain connectivity, bed form diversity, um, data, and also bank full flow dynamic data. You can also look at lateral migration, bed material characterization, and riparian vegetation within that representative subreach. Wood is a little funny. You're going to find your reach that has the most wood. And when I say wood, I need a separate term for this. I usually say your wood sampling reach is going to be 100 meters long, and it's the 100 meters with the most wood. And then physicochemical and biology sampling locations can vary. You might be able to lump a little bit more, particularly if you can arrange like an upstream, downstream comparison for your project. That all needs to be worked out, but just put a lot of thought into your sampling plan for the physicochemical and biology monitoring. Back to our example where we took our project area and we broke it into 4 reaches on the main stem and a 5th reach on the unnamed tributary. Reach 1 and the UT are long enough based on their bank full width. So you want that representative subreach to be at least 20 times the bank full width. They are very channelized, so I'm not really looking for meander wavelengths on this one. But the UT and reach 1 are long enough that representative subreaches were assessed. The other 3 are short enough that the entire length of them were assessed. Whew. All right, so that's kind of step 1. I'm jumping back to the overall SQT process. So after you collect your existing condition data, you're going to do another reach scale assessment of the proposed conditions. So remember, one of the reach break criteria was your proposed activity was also something you could use to filter reach breaks. We have added to, you guys are, I think the only SQT with an example like this, but it's always been an idea in the back of my head. Like if we're telling people, so in this particular example, like to split out a culvert as a separate reach. So example 8 in your user manual has a 40-foot long culvert that is proposed to be removed. For this particular example, the existing condition upstream of the culvert is distinct from the condition that is downstream of the culvert. So for that culvert removal project, there are 3 reaches identified. Here they're noted as main stem reach 3, 4, and 5. For the proposed condition, those are all, they're in the same valley. We've removed the culvert that's obstructing, and they are expected to have a very similar condition post-project. Your post-project, your proposed reach breaks, what you see during monitoring is not going to necessarily match what you saw in the existing condition. And that's to be expected because streams are messy. That means for monitoring, you might have a different reach break layout than you did for the existing condition. This creates a little bit of a funky, like you need to line up your existing and proposed conditions. But for this example, like when I go do monitoring, I am only assessing 1 reach and getting 1 proposed condition score because the conditions are similar post-project installation. And that is actually the end. How did I do?